In this video, I'll show the mask size and color inputs, and also I'll show the method of chaining the pattern packer node. So I've created a new pattern packer node and a shape node to use as the mask. First of all, I'm going to play around with some of these settings in the pattern packer and get something which looks more compact. So I'll reduce the scaling to something like that. Then I'll increase the amount to 2000. Okay, cool. Then I'll scroll up to the inputs and enable mask inputs. You'll see that you have a tolerance slider and a new mask input. I'll plug this disk shape into the mask and you can see that the pattern is now avoiding the white area. To show what the tolerance slider does, you'll need a mask with a range of values. I'll select the shape node and change the pattern to a paraboloid. The output more or less stays the same, except for this little fella here. I'll go back into the pattern packer and scroll down to the tolerance slider. By default, it is set to a 0 tolerance, which means any value above black is avoided. If you increase the slider, it will take grey values into account and use it to affect the opacity of the shapes. You can see, as the shapes start populating the inner circle towards the brighter values, the more transparent they become. Next, I'll talk about pattern chaining. You can use this method to layer the effects of pattern packer nodes together. If you want to combine different shapes, sizes, colors, or any other parameter of the nodes together, this method allows you to do that. It can also be used to generate even more shapes past the density threshold. So rather than increasing the amount of one node, it might be better to spread the number over multiple nodes. I'm going to zoom out a little in the graph window and duplicate this pattern packer node to keep all the settings. I'll double click this node to view the properties and scroll down to enable pattern chain input. You'll see that the pattern input connection is now enabled. So I'll just go to the previous node and plug the pattern into this new input. You'll see that the node has started filling the spaces between the shapes. I will go over to the diffuse output to show the original results, then plug the new node into it. Okay, now if I head back to the pattern packer node and change the random seed, it generates a new pattern filling into the empty spaces better. You can keep chaining the node as many times as you like to really refine the outcome. With each node, you can change any of the parameters to combine any number of effects together, all whilst having non-overlapping shapes. In this section, I'll show the size and color inputs. On the left, I have a cropped image of Botticelli's Birth of Venus with a grayscale conversion node attached. So with the pattern packer node selected, I'll scroll down the properties and enable the size input. You'll see that a new size input is now enabled. I'll connect the grayscale image to this new connection. Then I'll plug the pattern plus background into the diffuse output. You can see that the image is having an effect on the shape sizes. I'll see if I can make the effect more clear to show what's going on. So in the pattern packer, I'll scroll down and make the scale much smaller to something like 0.25. And I'll also give it some random size variation as well to make it more interesting. Then in the amount, I'll put it around 2000. You can see that it's taking the darker values of the size input and making the shapes smaller, and taking the lighter values and making the shapes bigger. You can see that it's starting to resemble the original image. The next input is the color. So I'll enable it, and you can see that that enables a color input. I'll connect the color image into this connection, and you'll see that the shapes are now taking on this color. As before, you can also chain the effect, so I'll duplicate this node and plug the pattern plus background into the diffuse. Then I'll enable the pattern chain input and plug the previous pattern into it. Then lastly, I'll change the random seed to generate a different pattern of shapes.